The book titled The Last Lecture came into being because Randy Pausch, a computer science professor at Carnegie Mellon University, had written down what he wanted his 3 young children to know. He did this because he had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and he knew he only had a few months left to live. In 2007, at the age of 47, he shared that advice in a last lecture delivered in front of 400 people. He passed away a few months later on July 25, 2008. Rather than being depressing, the last lecture is full of humor, insights, and optimism, and I agree with many of his points. For example, brick walls are there for a reason. The brick walls are not there to keep us out. The brick walls are there to show us how badly we want something. Show gratitude. Gratitude is a simple but powerful thing. Find the best in everybody. Wait long enough and people will surprise and impress you. We can't change the cards we are dealt, just how we play the hand. If I'm not as depressed as you think I should be, I'm sorry to disappoint you. If there is an elephant in the room, introduce it. It is better to fail spectacularly than to do something mediocre. As a side note, each year he gave out a First Penguin Award to a person who was a failure as a result of trying something grand and new. He thought that the courage to risk and the attempt to try something great should be celebrated. He named it the First Penguin Award because the first penguins are the ones that risk that the water might be too cold. This is my version of the last lecture. Not that I necessarily think I will be gone in a few months, but I do know that most of you will be. In a few months or a few years, almost everyone in this room will be scattered all over the world. This is my one and only chance to tell you something that I really hope will be helpful to you. And so I've thought very hard about what I would want to say in a last lecture. There are actually several things I would want to say, but I don't have time to cover all of the topics I would want to share with you. So I had to narrow it down significantly. And I finally came to a last lecture on the importance of being a disciple scholar. Why that topic? It can be a hard choice trying to narrow down a last lecture topic if you know that you can only share one. So, I will ask you, have you ever heard of the exercise of writing your own obituary or eulogy? Not to be grim this time either, but rather to consider what is important to you. What would you like to be remembered for? What mark do you want to leave? What are the most important life goals to you? We aren't talking about what you think you are like right now, or what abilities you might imagine that you have or don't have. By the way, when my students get frustrated and say that it's going to take them forever to learn something or to become something, I say, well, that's really lucky that there isn't a problem because we have forever. So you can project this exercise far into the future. You can even go into the realm of fantasy, whether you believe you would ever have the traits you desire or not. You write down what you hope or wish people would say about you as your legacy after you are gone. The idea of this exercise is to discover your overarching long-range goals in life. I think that God gives us a limited amount of time and money so that we have to prioritize and make choices, because that is the way that we determine and demonstrate what is most important to us. The idea of writing your eulogy is to find out what is really important to you and to use that as a framework to focus your life, to make sure that after you climb your ladder and you get to the top, that you don't realize that it was on the wrong wall the whole time. It is a map to what you do every day so that when your time is over, you will have done what you most wanted to do with the life that you were blessed with. I saw a quote recently that was attributed to Diane Ackerman that said, "I don't want to get to the end of my life and find out that I just lived the length of it. I want to have lived the width of it as well." It doesn't mean every day is perfect, but it does mean that if you decide what is really important to you, it can help you keep your life on track. Try the exercise of writing an obituary or eulogy for yourself. I think you will find it interesting. I have looked over my hoped-for eulogy while trying to decide what I would include in a last lecture. Here's some of what I would like to be remembered for anyway, or in other words, here are a few traits that I think are important. I hope that someone will be able to say I was kind, loving, uplifting, encouraging, inspiring, helpful, supportive, and that I made a difference to at least someone. I hope that it will be able to be said of me that I helped anyone who needed it, whether it was a person in need, a sickly plant, or an animal who needed a warm heart and loving care. I hope that it can be said I got up every time I fell down and that I was brave enough to keep trying. I hope I will have helped others come closer to God and learn His truths. I want to have helped someone know their infinite worth and to know that they are important and loved. I hope it will be able to be said of me that I loved God, my fellow man, and all of God's creations with my whole heart, that I loved my family, that the gospel was important to me, and that I represented and lived the gospel well. I hope it will be able to be said that I built and kept a testimony of God's love, of the atonement, and of the church, that I believed in Jesus Christ and tried to be a disciple of Him, and that I showed my testimony by serving with every bit of energy I could find or that I could wring out of me. I'm not there yet, but as I've said before, the purpose of the exercise isn't to determine where you are, but rather where you want to go. At any rate, this is a measure of what's important to me. Because of that, it is what I wanted to talk about in my version of the last lecture. To boil it down, there is one theme that runs through most of this. I think it is important to love and serve God and to give love, care, compassion, and service to His children and to all His living creations. In Matthew 22:35-40, it says, Jesus was asked, "Which is the great commandment in the law?" Jesus said unto him, "Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first great commandment, and the second is like unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets." Or in other words, the greatest of these is charity. This is an Elton Scholar lecture, and so the talk is also meant to be about learning and scholarship. How can it be about loving and serving, and yet also about learning and scholarship? Because love, service, learning, and scholarship are totally intertwined. They cannot and should not be pulled apart. Ponder the questions, why study? Why learn? Why develop the ability to think more clearly? Why develop tools and skills? Just as with everything else, you decide the focus and purpose to why you are here and why you learn. Those are questions that ultimately you will need to decide for yourself. As a side note, if you make your decisions earlier, it will make your education that much more important to you. But for now, let me tie it to my filter, to the importance of compassion and service. I have heard it said that knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is understanding you shouldn't put a tomato in a fruit salad. In other words, learning is best coupled to wise application. I think that the ultimate application of learning and scholarship is using your knowledge in giving love and service. At Southern Virginia University, we profess that we are trying to become leader servants. We are trying to follow our exemplar, Jesus Christ. I think that we can lead only when we have knowledge. We can serve only when we have love and compassion. And so, in my opinion, to be true leader servants, we need to combine learning and scholarship with love and service. I'm impressed by the motto of our university, learn, that life is service, as well as by the university's 5 core values. These core values also cannot be separated from each other because they are also so tightly intertwined. Notice, discipleship, scholarship, enthusiasm, accountability, and refinement appearing together because they belong together. I have heard it said the only 2 things we take with us from this life are our knowledge or learning and our relationships, which involve love. I would also include a third being covenants, which from our end promise to God our commitment to learn what we should do, and then to do it by applying it as our service and love to God and to others. But knowledge and love, I think that those 2 items are not separate. I think that the reason why we take those 2 with us is because ultimately they will be tied together and as one intertwined attribute. Yes, we learn because we want to see the world with new eyes. Yes, we learn because we want to have employment so we can take better care of ourselves and our families, of course. But learning is not complete if it is only for ourselves. It is of more significance when it is also applied to helping others. Lorenzo Snow said, "Each last day or each last week should be the best that we've ever experienced. That is, we should advance ourselves a little every day in knowledge and wisdom and in the ability to accomplish good." The ability to accomplish good. Learning and knowledge gives us that ability. I'm not saying that you cannot serve others without a college degree. There are some educated adults as well as some warm-hearted and giving people with limited education. But what I am saying is that the more knowledge and skills you have, the more tools you have to be able to help others. For example, if I did not spend hours and hours sitting in front of a keyboard practicing, it would have cut off an opportunity for me to serve. In addition, I did not learn how to play the piano and the organ just so I could walk around with some knowledge in my head, or just so that I could play them for myself. Although it does bring me enjoyment to play those instruments, ultimately I find greater joy by serving others, by sharing the spirit of music through them. In general, when people do not gain the skills or knowledge that they were sent here on earth to obtain, then God does not have as many tools to draw upon when he's trying to build up the kingdom and serve and use us to serve others. You are here to learn so that you can fulfill your purpose in life. What is that purpose? Some of it may be reflected in the eulogy you write. Some may be found in your patriarchal blessing. Some you will learn through prayer. Some you may learn only as you move through life. But even though you may not know all of your purposes yet, when the time comes that you are called upon to fulfill your particular missions, what you have learned will be there to be drawn upon. And so the focus of a last lecture is about becoming a better disciple scholar. I want to illustrate how knowledge and love go together and why they are such a powerful combination. Loving and serving others is something that comes from the heart, but effective, genuine service is something that requires important attributes and skills. I want to illustrate those attributes of disciple scholars using a few examples from amazing students I have had the pleasure of associating with over the years. I somehow work with the best students in the world. I really think that. I don't know how it keeps happening, that I have such quality students who are not only scholars, but who also have great moral character and are some of the most charitable people I know. But nonetheless, that is what keeps happening, and I feel blessed. I'm afraid that I can only use a few examples. So to all of my great students, just rest assured that I notice and appreciate you, and I admire you greatly. So here is a last lecture as illustrated by the lives of some of my disciple scholar students. Here are the principles they show you about combining knowledge, love, and service. First, spend time with others. Listen to them and notice their needs. At a remote area medical or RAM clinic a few years ago, several people were working in the blood lab when a patient named Mabel came in. Mabel was the type of person who might have been too easy to overlook. She mumbled and was very difficult to understand. In addition, she did not make much sense when she talked. It was mostly gibberish. People tried again and again to get basic information from her so they could register her for needed blood work. Mabel would just mumble, but what little could be understood was usually nonsensical numbers. They tried again and again using a variety of approaches to communicate with her. Every time they tried, they got nothing usable. They spent a considerable amount of time with her. And at RAM clinics, there are hundreds and hundreds of patients who are waiting to be seen. So in an effort to balance the needs of the many people waiting with the needs of the one, it can be difficult if it seems as though a patient is taking too long and may not be able to be seen anyway. Most people were to the point of giving up on Mabel. However, Alex Carter, a former SVU student, thought that Mabel needed some individual attention. So she took Mabel to one side and decided that she would take the time to work with her. She spent an extensive amount of time with Mabel, and at some point found out somehow that Mabel was very hungry. So Alex went to look to see if she could find anything that she could share with Mabel. Finally, she found a banana and brought it back. After the course of some more time in talking with Mabel, Alex somehow learned that Mabel was living in a house that had no heat. This clinic was in the last part of October, so winter was coming on and it was getting cold. Alex found me to explain the situation and to ask if there was anything that we could do to help Mabel. I tracked down information that put us in contact with a social services worker who assured me that they would visit Mabel and make sure that she would be warm that winter. It was because an SVU student took the time to notice needs, especially in a situation when it would have been very easy to overlook. Alex was there because she had developed the skill of being able to draw blood. As a side note, she had developed that skill because she had previously had a dread fear of needles. So she faced down her fear by learning how to give immunizations and by learning how to draw blood. Kudos for courage. Don't let your personal demons hold you back from service. She combined her fairly unique skill with an ability to listen patiently and notice a need. And in the process, she gave something that no one else did. And for those reasons, she's an example of a disciple scholar. Second, give love with service and prioritize people over tasks. Neal A. Maxwell taught that we need to search our souls to see if it is possible that in our present tasks we may be giving of our time, talents, and money without really giving fully of ourselves. It is possible to withhold self while still doing much. Then he quoted Dorothy Briggs by saying, "It has been noted how some prefer to give presents rather than presents." My students have shown me time and again that they know love for another is more important than the actual task. As one example, when we were giving medical service in Guatemala, a group consisting of Professor Gibbons and former SVU student Nelson McNaughton were sent to give follow-up care to a boy named Elian. Because of recent heavy rains, there had been mudslides in the area. When one of the mudslides came, Elian, along with his mother, all of his siblings, and his grandparents were in their home. The home was completely buried in an avalanche of mud. In the end, Elian was the only one who was pulled out of the mud and was saved. This young boy lost his mother, all of his brothers and sisters, and his grandparents in one day. Nelson removed stitches from Elian's matted hair. But more importantly, Nelson and Professor Gibbons spent some time with Elian, showing their compassion to a boy who will be more scarred by the loss of his family than by any physical injury he suffered. It was one of many acts of kindness that will need to be given to this boy to help him put his life back together again. But it was one. Their love and care for this boy was of even more significance than the task performed for him that day. Next, show initiative. Do more than required and put some of yourself into your service. In other words, go the extra mile. When a group of SVU students and I were in Ghana to give medical service, we were assigned duties at the local hospital. The hospital was a fairly grim place with almost no equipment, as you can see by this picture. And it had grimy walls, poor conditions, and a constant flow of people who were desperately ill. In addition, the power would often go out, and there was very little in the way of even the basics, such as gloves or gauze. In reading back over my journal from that trip, I noticed that many days when we came into work, we would find that as many as half of the patients in a ward had died the previous night. Often people would die because it would take as much as a day or two to be seen by a doctor, even if they were gravely ill. For example, one of the small babies brought in was there because her family had abandoned her at the hospital. Her mother had recently died from hepatitis A. The family was unable to care for the baby, so she was just abandoned one day at the hospital. At first, the baby lay near death for 3 hours before she was seen by a doctor. When I saw her, she was gravely ill, partly because of malnutrition, but also because of infection. Pneumonia had set in because her IV line ran for 24 hours at too high a rate and wasn't turned off in time. It wasn't discovered for 24 hours since the doctor was only able to come around once a day. And so the excess fluids went into her lungs. I have often wondered if she lived or died. The situations were often very grim, and the hospital buildings matched the conditions. The SVU students worked at the hospital from 6 or 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. each day, giving as much care as possible. After 2 p.m., they were free to experience the culture, go to the beach, play soccer with local children, relax, or engage in many other types of activities that might have been fun for them. However, they felt that they had come to Africa to give service, and so they wanted to do more than just their assignments. However, they were not allowed to do additional shifts at the clinic after 2 p.m. Since there was nothing else that was structured for them to do, they figured out on their own another way that they could serve. Taking a look around, they decided that the children's building at the hospital was in desperate need of some attention. They formulated a plan, got approval from the director of the hospital, and then chipped in their own money to buy 3 cans of paint that they could use to decorate the children's building and make the environment more pleasant. I had no idea how to find the paint since it wasn't as though there was a Walmart or Sherwin-Williams in the area. For example, this was how you bought caskets and everything else there, and random lean-tos that were set next to the sides of the roads. But the students got hold of red, yellow, and blue paint so they could mix them together in whatever combinations they wanted to make all of the colors. After they were done helping to provide medical care, they would change into painting clothes and paint until it was almost dark. They were definitely using artistic skills that they had learned and developed as disciple scholars. They decorated the walls with cheery designs, and as you can see, they put themselves into the project as they left part of themselves and their handprints on Africa. In the process, they transformed the room into this. What a difference they made as they used their special skills and did more than what was just asked of them. What they had learned as scholars was translated into special service as disciples. The fact that it went beyond the minimums or requirements showed an important aspect of service. They were true examples of disciple scholars. Next, sacrifice when needed, even if it means sharing the shirt off of your back. When we were in Guatemala for a medical service trip, on one occasion we were brought to a group of people who had been dumped out into the middle of a field with essentially nothing but the clothes on their backs, and a few pieces of black plastic stretched out over the tops of poles. It looked to me as though there were approximately 100 people living in the middle of this field, and only a few makeshift tents, if you could call them that, with no walls. These people had come from a small village that was located at the bottom of a mountain. The mountain had a bowl-type feature on one side, and when recent heavy rains had come, it had filled the bowl with huge amounts of water, and there were concerns that the sides would give way, dumping tons of mud, followed by a wall of water, onto these people's homes, which would, of course, kill most, if not all, in the village. As a result, the people were taken from their homes in haste. The wall of mud and water then came down and covered many of their homes, so they were not able to get their personal items out. These people were dropped off in a field and were told to build their lives all over again, starting from essentially nothing. Because the students and I were EMTs, we were asked to do preliminary assessments of this group's medical needs. Previous training made these students helpful in being able to address this need of these people. We also handed out clothing, shoes, and for a bit of cheer, some candy to the expectant people who were waiting in line. However, here is where a student was really able to demonstrate a great lesson about service. Most people who donate clothing for trips such as these are very thoughtful about providing children's clothing. However, usually the teenagers are overlooked. We had a considerable amount of clothing for the children who were waiting in line, but almost nothing for the teenagers. One of the freshman pre-mission students, Seth Hartman, felt really bad for the teenage boys who would be turned away with nothing. He asked me if it would be okay to give them the shirt off of his back. I told him that a hopeful boy would appreciate it, but that ultimately it was his decision to make. Next thing I saw, he snuck behind a van to take his shirt off. He was trying to not have anyone realize that the shirt he would give was the shirt off of his back. He handed the shirt to someone else to give to a teenage boy so that not many would even notice that he had given a personal gift. I don't think that he ever even realized that I had noticed what he was doing and snapped a photo. But after giving the shirt off of his back, he just kept saying to me, "I didn't know. I didn't know. I have so many clothes in my closet at home. If only I would have known, I would have brought so much for these people. I had no idea people lived like this. I didn't know." Because he could do no other, he sacrificed and gave the shirt off his back. He illustrated an important concept in a last lecture about disciple scholars, sacrifice. Next, carry each other when needed. Somehow it can be easier to give service to people on the other side of the world than it is to serve those close to us. But we need to care for each other as well. Only a few days before we left on our medical mission trip to Ecuador, one of the students broke her foot at Panther Falls. There was some question as to whether she would even be able to make the trip, but she insisted she really wanted to go, and she would help in whatever capacity she could. However, while we were in Ecuador, it became apparent that although she could give some types of medical service, that it would be unlikely she would be able to do all the sightseeing we had scheduled. She was disappointed. But I forgot that I travel with some true disciples. When the boys saw there was a problem, they offered to carry her wherever we were going, including up hills that were steep enough to make anyone winded even when they weren't carrying anyone. It slowed them down and it was an effort for them, but they saw this as a team effort and they were willing to carry each other when it was needed. Next, teach. When possible, don't just help out, help up. Although the opportunities that are presented to you seem to be very commonplace, the number of people in this world who have the opportunities that you do is really incredibly small. If you travel the world much, or to a lesser but still important degree, even if you look around yourself in the United States, you will come to appreciate how few people have the educational opportunities, financial wherewithal, health, energy, and testimony to give the kind of service that you can give. For example, in Ghana, I was told that approximately 80% of children are considered orphans. Not that all of them have lost both parents through death, but many have, and the remainder have been abandoned because their families cannot afford to care for them. In Ghana, if a child is considered an orphan, it can be much more difficult for them to get an education. Most people do not receive so much as a complete grade school education. In Guatemala, a similar pattern was seen where many, if not most, people did not have the opportunity to receive more than a grade school education, if that much. As a result, these people are locked into a life of poverty and limited opportunities. One piece of the complex puzzle for how to break the trend is to provide education. Education can help to make people's lives better, healthier, more productive, and more likely to lift the entire family and future generations out of poverty. In addition, just as in your case, education and learning can be important to helping people fulfill their missions in life. As part of all of our medical mission trips, students have spent some of their time teaching. Often they have taught reading, writing, and English lessons to children in orphanages. They have also taught children and adults alike how to stay healthier. For example, when we were in Ghana, we mostly saw the same problems and health issues over and over and over again. Malaria, AIDS, both parasite and bacterial infections from bad drinking water or tainted food. People tended to be chronically ill or to die from very preventable diseases. It was a very sad and very frustrating situation. Rather than have us spend all of our time in the clinics to treat the illnesses, we were told that one of the best uses of our time and one of the most effective projects we could engage in was to go to rural villages and teach people how to prevent these illnesses. People in these villages were so grateful that they made some of us queen mothers or chiefs of their tribes. This is a picture of a former SVU student, Hashani Perkins, who was made chief of a tribe and who is teaching that tribe how to live healthier lives. Teaching others can be one of the greatest acts of service we can give to them because it can help change their lives rather than just help them for the temporary moment. As a side note, I was made queen mother of the tribe at Mampong, and the name given to me by that tribe is Nana Obuswa, the second queen mother of Mampong. It is an honor I still carry. In addition to the honor, I learned that queen mothers are not to work and should not do menial tasks such as dishes, laundry, or house cleaning. I have tried to convince my husband of my queenly status, but he says that it only applies when I'm in Africa. I need to go back to Africa soon. Next, walk a mile in the other person's shoes. We have always tried to immerse ourselves in the cultures of the countries we have visited and tried to see life through the eyes of those we are trying to serve. As a result, we are often in a position to better identify needs and to be in the right place with the right eyes to give the right type of service. Shortly after arriving in Guatemala, we went to one of the outlying clinics where we would start working the next day. We went to the clinic because we wanted to introduce ourselves and determine our service schedule. Just outside the clinic, there was a large water truck that had stopped because the residents of the village had experienced a disruption in their normal water supply due to heavy rains. People in the area rounded up as many containers as they could so that they would be able to stock up on some water. We saw what was happening and ended up spending quite a long time on an important, unanticipated side project, helping the women fill their water containers and then helping them carry the very, very heavy containers back to their homes, walking a mile in their shoes. At the end of that activity, we were waiting to catch the last bus for the night that would take us back to where we were staying. When two SVU students saw an elderly woman and decided that they needed to walk with her, carry her bundles, and help her get through the mud and rivers of water to her home. In both cases, the students were able to help by seeing through another person's eyes and walking a mile in another person's shoes. Next, have a good attitude and adapt. Serve where and how you are needed rather than where you most want to. I've had so many students who have served where they're needed rather than where they most wanted to serve. However, two of the most recent examples come from the two most recent remote area medical clinics we volunteered at this spring. At each of these clinics, we had students volunteer to serve in some of the most disgusting areas of the clinic: dental instruments, sterilization, and as bucket crews to empty the suction cups at each dentist's workstation. The suction cups contain all the pus and slimy, smelly spit, bad breath, blood, and ooze that is suctioned out of people's mouths as the dentists work on them. The buckets stink so bad that I usually start to gag if I get anywhere near them. The bucket crew for the slimy suction containers is usually lost after only about a half an hour, since most students at most other schools usually wander off, even though they had committed to doing the task. As a result, it is a job that is difficult to get and keep students for, but it is a really important job because otherwise the suction cups overflow. This job is not as glamorous as assisting a dentist or doing some other high-level service. However, my students have actually volunteered to sterilize instruments and to empty the goo buckets because no one else was willing to. I have told the students that they were rock stars and that we would see if we could rotate them out with some students from other schools after a few hours. When I checked back in on them several hours later, they were still all working their hearts out at the same jobs. There was no one else to substitute in for them. When I told them that I was sorry we could not find substitutes so that they could trade out, and so I felt bad for them, they asked why. They said that they had come to give service and that they were willing to give it, no matter where it was or how disgusting it was. I will forever hold these students in the highest regard because they showed that it isn't serving where you want to serve, but serving where you are needed most. It is also about doing a good job, even if it seems small. Next, serve even if you don't know if you will do a perfect job. If I had a nickel for every time I biffed it, I would make much more money than I do by teaching. I don't go out looking for mistakes and learning opportunities, but somehow they keep managing to find me. And so when those opportunities come, I figure that it isn't a bad thing to keep standing in the batter's box and keep swinging away. That is how we learn. And even imperfect service is better than no service at all. When my father passed away almost 25 years ago, I was devastated. It had also been a difficult time leading up to his passing since he was gravely ill for about 6 years before that. It was a very hard time in my life. I noticed that the more I struggled, the more people avoided me, and the less that they spoke to me. Someone told me that it was because they were afraid of saying the wrong thing. However, the isolation just made my pain that much worse, and I wished anyone would say anything to me. And so, when I realized that if the situations were reversed in my future, I needed to be less afraid of making a mistake than I was of not doing what I could to help. And now, when I don't feel up to a task, but I want to help someone, I love to remember this quote by Elder Neal A. Maxwell. God does not begin by asking about our ability, but only about our availability. And then if we prove our dependability, he will increase our capability. Next, remember that your talents are unique and needed, and everyone has talents to contribute. One of the reasons to be a disciple scholar is so you will have your own unique talents to share. One of the best examples of this was illustrated during the RAM clinics we've hosted on the SVU campus. We needed so many people who had unique and important skills they had developed so that we could provide nearly $500,000 worth of medical, dental, and vision care to our brothers and sisters in our community. For instance, we needed electricians, carpenters, and plumbers from our own SVU maintenance crew who provided their important and useful skills. In addition, we needed the housekeeping staff to somehow stay on top of all the facilities care that was needed during the clinic, and they did that, bless them. Business students raised money for the clinic. In addition, we had a businessman who used his success to financially support one of the clinics. Art students provided posters, thank you signs, and help with advertisement. Students used their musical skills to put on a benefit concert that raised money for the clinic. The kitchen staff cooked many meals for hundreds of volunteers, something that I definitely can't do. Communications people helped with getting the advertisements out, contacting TV and radio stations, and writing news articles for the newspaper. IT staff set up sound equipment, computers, and copiers that were needed at the clinic. We wouldn't have been allowed to have the clinic without the security team and their special skills. Some people used their skills to rally others, so we had donated clothing, blankets, and coats for patients to bring home with them. Students and community members provided their people skills and energy to set up the clinic, register patients, pass out donated food, provide entertainment, drive shuttles, direct traffic, pass out water, provide smiles, and give helping hands. Students had special training, worked in the triage area, measured visual acuity, made glasses, did glaucoma checks, and assisted dentists. Students also worked alongside administration to locate housing, get food donations, recruit volunteers such as doctors and dentists, and prepare many other facets of the clinic. Of course, doctors, dentists, eye doctors, opticians, EMTs, nurses, dental assistants, and hygienists all gave their unique skills to help make the clinic a success. This clinic could not have happened without so many people with giving hearts and unique skills, many within our own SVU community. Maybe some felt ho-hum, like they didn't have anything important that they contribute, but they were doing things that were important. Without everyone helping, we couldn't have had a clinic. It was a team effort that required everyone, and I'm so proud to say that I'm associated with such a fine group of people. And so it is in life. If you become an artist, you can do a show to raise money for a benefit project, or you could create a painting for a hospital to give hope or cheer to someone. You could inspire others as a teacher. You could be a computer scientist that can help someone learn, teach, and serve more efficiently and effectively. You could benefit others with the beautiful music you compose or perform. You could be a healthcare worker that heals. You could write an inspiring literary work. You get the idea. No matter what your skills are, there is a way that you can use them to bless others. First, you need to discover them and develop them so that you can use them as a disciple scholar. None of us can do everything, but we can each do something, and we need each other. Next, serve consistently. Neal A. Maxwell taught us, accept the potential in each learning experience. We must learn to serve in tasks that require thrust and initiative, but also in roles that focus on maintenance. The one produces the thrills of a beachhead landing in enemy territory, while in jobs involving minding the store, one must often serve quietly. Consistency is an important but difficult aspect of service. But for many of my SVU students, they serve consistently. For example, many of my students have been on 20 to 30 remote area medical trips by the time they graduate from SVU. They have demonstrated their true discipleship through consistent service. Next, serve the one. Although it is wonderful to help as many people as possible, don't forget that we are always serving the one. I'm struck by the account of Jesus visiting the Nephites described in the Book of Mormon, 3 Nephi chapter 11, verses 14 and 15. In that account, Jesus says, "Arise and come forth unto me, that ye may thrust your hands into my side, and also that ye may feel the prints of the nails in my hands and in my feet, that ye may know I am the God of Israel, and the God of the whole earth, and have been slain for the sins of the world." And it came to pass that the multitude went forth, and thrust their hands into his side, and did feel the prints of the nails in his hands and in his feet. And this they did do, going forth one by one, until they had all gone forth, and did see with their eyes, and did feel with their hands, and did know of a surety, and did bear record, that it was he of whom it was written by the prophets that should come. One by one. The way that Christ teaches, saves, and serves is also our model for service. Last, build your testimony of Heavenly Father, of his love, of the Savior's atonement, and of the church and the gospel in your heart. Also gain more of an influence of the Spirit in your life and pray for charity. Among other important reasons, these will also become the motivating force for the love and service you give to God and to your fellow man. And so, for my version of a last lecture, the importance of love, service, and learning, becoming a disciple scholar, as exemplified in the lives, actions, and compassion of some of my students. Love and serve everyone from your heart. Think of others and notice needs. Put people over tasks. Do more than minimums. Find your goals, dreams, and mission in life. Learn passionately all you can. Have a good attitude. Be consistent. Teach, build your testimony, live close to the Spirit, believe Christ, use your time wisely, don't wait to be perfect to try. I would like to close by reading a quote from C.S. Lewis, who was not a member of the LDS faith, but who often had an interesting grasp of LDS theology. It may be possible for each to think too much of his own potential glory hereafter. It is hardly possible for him to think too often or too deeply about that of his neighbor. The load or weight or burden of my neighbor's glory should be laid on my back, a load so heavy that only humility can carry it, and the backs of the proud will be broken. It is a serious thing to live in a society of possible gods and goddesses, to remember that the dullest and most uninteresting person you can talk to may one day be a creature which, if you saw it now, you would be strongly tempted to worship, or else a horror and a corruption such as you now meet, if at all, only in a nightmare. All day long we are, in some degree, helping each other to one or the other of these destinations. It is in the light of these overwhelming possibilities, it is with the awe and the circumspection proper to them that we should conduct all our dealings with one another, all friendships, all love, all play, all politics. There are no ordinary people. You have never talked to a mere mortal.